Tonight we're talking about math. Who in here hates math? I hate math, man. In 2006, I was a sixth grader at Jackson Christian School. I had a math test that day, and I did not study. Y'all ever been there, had a math test, you're like, I'll wing it, and then you find out just how terrible you are at it? Okay, so 2006, I'm a sixth grader at Jackson Christian School, and I've got a math test in Miss Dahlstrom's math class, okay? And we had chapel every single day, and after chapel, I had math. Okay, and so me and another guy, Ross DeJarnett, we decided that we were going to get out of the math test. Okay, so the way that Ms. Dahlstrom usually did it was we would come to class, we would go over the homework, we'd go over the test, and we'd take the test. We usually had about 30 minutes for our test. So we go to chapel, we get done with chapel, me and Ross make a beeline to the math classroom. We go inside, Ms. Dahlstrom's not back yet. We knew about how long that it would take her to get there. We planned this for a couple days, okay? So there's two clocks in the classroom. There's one by the door, and there's one behind where she sits. So Joseph already knows what's coming. Ross takes the clock by the door. I take the clock on the other side of the classroom. We move it up 30 minutes. Ross, in the middle of him changing the clocks, he dropped his clock. Comes crashing down to the ground. He gets it back up, puts it where I've got my clock, and we go outside. Ms. Dahlstrom walks in. We go inside, and the whole class was in on this. Like, they were lookouts. Because the lookouts are just as important as the people doing the mischievous act, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, shout out to all the lookouts in the room. Yeah, we need you. So we go inside. Ms. Dahlstrom starts going over the homework. She goes over the homework. She goes over the test. And she goes to hand the test out, and she looks at the clock and goes, oh, my goodness, we don't have time to take the test. Well, how many of you know there's always that snitch in the room? Now, one girl raised her hand. She goes, Ms. Dahlstrom, Zach and Ross changed the clocks. So I launched detention later, and whole 9 yards, we had to take the test. I'm pretty sure I failed it. Bottom line is I hate math. But tonight, we're going to go over a simple yet difficult math equation, okay? And I don't care how much schooling you get in your life. I don't care how far you go. I don't care if you have more degrees than a thermometer. Guys, if you cannot get this math equation, you've missed the point. Okay, you've missed the point. So tonight we're going to be in the book of Philippians, chapter 1, verses 12 through 21. It's going to be on the screen. We're going to hit 12 through 19 real quick, and we're going to talk about it. It says this. Paul is writing to the church in Philippi, and he says, now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has actually resulted in the advance of the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is the cause of Christ. Most of the brothers in the Lord have gained confidence from my imprisonment and dare even more to speak the message fearlessly. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and strife, but others out of goodwill. Those who do so out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. The others proclaim Christ out of rivalry, not sincerely, seeking to cause me anxiety in my imprisonment. What does it matter? Just in every way, whether out of false motives or true, Christ is proclaimed. And in this I rejoice. Yes, I rejoice, because I know this will lead to my deliverance through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Guys, the first thing we see tonight in our math equation on your sheet is perspective. The first blank is perspective. Guys, let's give you a history lesson on Paul real quick, just in case you don't know who we're talking about. Some of you, this is going to be review. Some of you, this is going to be brand new. Paul was once a Pharisee named Saul. Okay, when I say Pharisee, guys, the Pharisees are the ones that put Jesus on a cross. They were the ringleaders. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were the ringleaders in crucifying Jesus. Okay, and in the book of Acts, we see the first Christian martyr. It was a guy named Stephen. Okay, he was killed for his belief, for his faith. Okay, and they laid their coats down at a young man's feet named Saul. Okay, so then Saul, he was famous for killing Christians. He was famous for persecuting Christians. Saul's name went before him. His reputation went before him. Okay, and Christians all over the place were scared to death of Saul. And so Saul is on the road to Damascus. He meets Jesus. He gives his life to Christ. Saul becomes Paul, and all of a sudden his life gets turned upside down. Okay, he starts getting beaten for the gospel because he's preaching Jesus. He's preaching Jesus Christ. He gets beat for the gospel. He gets imprisoned. He gets the cat of nine tails. He gets stoned. All these things is what is now who Paul is. And Paul is writing this letter from jail. And Paul's right out of the gate, he says, brothers, he says, what has happened to me has actually resulted in the advance of the gospel. Paul is saying, no matter what has happened to me, Christ has been proclaimed. He said, whether I've been beaten, whether I've been flogged, whether I've been stoned, or I've been thrown in prison, every single thing that has happened to me has happened to me so that Christ can be exalted. Okay? Paul could have sat there and said, I'm in jail, poor pitiful me, everything is bad. But Paul says, my perspective, once I met Christ, changed. Because the Bible says that old things have come, behold, all things are made new when we become Christians in Christ. And that means your perspective has to change as well. This is not going to be on the screen, but we're going to talk about an Old Testament story real quick for the second time because I've got a lot of stuff I want to cover tonight. I'm going to give you the Zach International version, okay? We're going to be talking about Daniel chapter 3, verse 18. Okay, you see, setting the stage here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, there's a king called Nebuchadnezzar. He builds this massive statue, and he wants all the people in the land to bow down to it at the sound of a horn. And there's these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And when the horn blows, all the country bows down except for three guys. They kind of look like corn stalks in a bean field. You know what I'm saying? When you drive by that bean field and you're like, oh, they planted corn here last year because there's that one corn stalk up. These guys stood out like a sore thumb. Okay? The king sees them. He brings them over. He says, hey, look, I want you to bow down. They said, we're not going to bow down to your God. He said, okay, well, then your punishment is death. So they go to this furnace and he cranks it up to way hotter than it's supposed to be. And he gives them one more chance. He says, you can bow down to this idol, or we're going to throw you in the furnace and kill you. And I've heard sermons preached on this, and after I read this verse, it changed my life. Heck, it's even my background on my phone. They made this statement. They said, look, you can throw us in the fire, and God can save us, but even if He doesn't, God is still good. You see, these guys faced death, and they said, God can do this, but even if He doesn't, He is still God. That's perspective. You say, Zach, what's that look like today? You say, man, you go to the doctor, you get the bad diagnosis of cancer. Look, God can heal me, but even if He doesn't, He's still good. Even if I fail the test, God is still good. Even if my boyfriend or my girlfriend breaks up with me, He is still good. Even if I don't get the promotion, even if, God is still good. Before we move on, I want to introduce you to a guy named Dan Bland. Dan, he was a D1 running back. He played for Mississippi State. I know Dan very well. He played for Mississippi State back in like the 40s or 50s. Dan went on to be a high school football coach. Dan won state championships. Dan's a Hall of Fame member in Jackson with the same Hall of Fame my mom's in. Dan married a woman named Martha. Dan and Martha had two kids. One son tragically died about 30 years ago. Dan, he went to the doctor a couple years ago and got diagnosed with cancer. They said, it's a weird cancer. They said, look, it's not going to kill you because we caught it, but we can't cure you either. So Dan's got cancer. Then about the same time Dan gets cancer, Martha, when I tell you Dan adores Martha, it's something Hollywood can't write. I mean, it's incredible. Martha gets diagnosed with dementia. She starts showing signs of dementia. So Dan's got cancer. Martha's dementia is rapidly advancing. On top of that, about a year ago, Dan gets shingles. It's a real bad skin condition. You only get it after you get chicken pox. I don't understand it, but it's bad. Dan, because of his cancer, he's been fighting shingles for over a year. Okay, and it's so bad, it hurts him so much that his son, the son that's still alive, is the head football coach at Mississippi College, where we go to Fuge every now and then when we used to go to Fuge. Dan can't even drive down to see John because his shingles hurt him so bad that his shirt resting on his stomach puts him in pain to where he can't drive. And so Dan's got all this stuff going on in his life. And I wasn't here for this conversation, but my godmother Betty told me about it. She said, someone asked Dan about his situation, about him having cancer, Martha having dementia, his shingles, all this stuff. And they said Dan thought for a second, and he looked at him and he said, ever since we had to bury our son, Martha has woken up every single day with the pain of losing a child. He said, since she got dementia, God has taken that pain away from her. That is perspective. That's what perspective looks like. Moving on, we're going to be in verse 20. Paul writes this. He said, my eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but that now, as always, with all boldness, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. Secondly, tonight we see perspective plus purpose. Perspective plus purpose. And let me just be real with y'all. I almost took this out But if I had taken it out, I would have had to change the whole message. I almost took it out because about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Brother Clay preached a sermon where purpose was a main point. And he really hit a lot of the high notes that I wanted to hit. And so I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do that. And then, just because he had just preached it. And then 2 weeks ago, Caleb Jones comes here, and let's just be real, Caleb absolutely killed it if you were here. I mean, he did phenomenal. He talked about purpose. And he talked about how our purpose was to love God, love others. And so then I was like, man, God, Brother Clay hit it. Caleb hit it. I don't really know if I need to hit it. And all of a sudden, it was like God just gave me the thought that sometimes we go through seasons in life, and every season has a theme. And right now, we need to talk about purpose. So we're going to talk about purpose tonight. Paul, he sits here and he says in verse 20, I'm going to read it one more time, just so we have it fresh on us. He says, my eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but now, as always, with all boldness, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. Paul sitting here says, look, no matter what happens, whether I get stoned, whether I get flogged, whether I get thrown in prison, my life is going to preach Christ no matter what. That is our purpose. That's it. That is absolutely it. About in March of this year, I got a text. I woke up to it. I'd been working all night. Those of you who don't know, I work midnights. Like, it's my morning time. Like, I just had breakfast. Y'all just had supper. It's weird. I know. Sorry. So I was asleep during the day. I woke up to a text, and it was a number I didn't have. And it said, hey, Zach, this is Keith Runyon with LHS. When's a good time to call you? And so I texted him back and said, hey, you can just call me now. I didn't really know what was up. So he calls me. He says, Zach, I'm the head basketball coach at LHS. I said, yes, sir. He said, I've got the pieces of the puzzle to make a championship run in a year or two, and I need an assistant coach. He said, what about you come on and be a teacher at LHS and an assistant coach? And let me just tell you what he just offered me, okay? I'm a cop, for those of you who don't know. He just offered me a normal work schedule, Monday through Friday. I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm a hostage negotiator. If my phone rings, I got to go, no matter if I'm working or not. So he offered me Monday through Friday, with the exception of games and practices. He offered me weekends and holidays, about a $12,000 pay jump. I mean, he offered me a lot. Let's just be real. But I told him, I said, Coach, I said, as much as I want to, right now my mission field is Madison County. I said, I can't walk away from what I'm doing. Because you see, if I don't take the gospel to Madison County, nobody else will. There's some rock solid guys that work in the office and work on day shifts. I mean, I could go through your list, Vester Jones, Mac Brown, Alfonso Newber, and TJ King. Like, I could go through all these guys and tell you, man, they're killing it for the gospel and they're killing it for the kingdom, but they don't work my shift. If I don't pull up my car beside somebody and have a 30-second gospel conversation with a cop, no one else will. If I don't stop out with two guys that just ran away from Youthtown, and I'm talking to him, and I said, man, why are you in Youthtown? He said, man, I'm looking for something that I can't put my finger on. He said, I thought the alcohol would do it, it wouldn't do it. I thought the weed would do it, it wouldn't do it. I thought the sex would do it, it wouldn't do it. He said, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm just looking for fulfillment. And I said, dude, what you're looking for has a name. His name is Jesus. And until you give your life to Christ, you're never going to find it. But I'm telling you, what you're looking for is Jesus. If I don't have that conversation, nobody else will. Nobody else is coming. You see, guys, your purpose, yes, is to love God and love others, but your purpose every single day is to preach Christ with your life to those that are around you. Be the person that if you don't take the gospel to your football team, nobody else will. If you don't take the gospel to your math class, nobody else will. To your band, nobody else will. You see, I'm training for a marathon. Y'all know Ryan talked to you about it last week. I've ran, according to my app, 208 miles in my training. And if I had $1 for every single piece of litter that I've ran by during that time, I could retire right now. I could. And you see, we run by that litter and we don't pick it up. You know why? Because we say there's a litter crew coming that's going to pick it up. Someone else will get it. Tonight when we set up for the service, half of y'all didn't help us. Why? Because you knew somebody else would. The gospel's not like that. Nobody's coming behind you to tell your friends about Jesus. If you don't do it, nobody else will. Nobody else is coming. Be the person that says, I don't care whether it be by life or by death, my life is going to proclaim Jesus with boldness. Take the gospel to your friends. Take the gospel to your family. Take the gospel to your work environment, because that is your purpose. If you don't do it, nobody else will. Finally, tonight we look at verse 21. Paul writes this, for me, living is Christ and dying is gain. Short verse, but man, it's packed. Tonight we see that perspective plus purpose equals an abundant life. equals an abundant life. Now, if you've sat in church at any amount of time, you know that there's a verse that says that Jesus says, I've come to give you life and life more abundant. And let me just go ahead and pop your Christian bubble, okay? So let me just go ahead and prepare for this. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that you have an abundant life. Like, I know I just rained on your parade. I'm so sorry. But just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that you're living an abundant life. Just because you come to Sunday school and listen to your teacher for an hour and then go to church and to what we used to call big church and listen to Brother Clay for an hour and then come in here at Revive and listen to us for an hour doesn't mean that you're living an abundant life, because then you go and put Jesus on a shelf and you leave him there until the weekend. Guys, abundant life is so much more than that. You see, my iPhone, when I went to Verizon, I'm a creature of habit. Ethan was talking about this earlier. Yeah, me too. When I go to Verizon, I usually deal with the same guy. He's the only LeBron that I like. His name's LeBron. I don't like the other LeBron. It's fine. I'm a Kobe guy. It's cool. But I go in and I said, hey, yo, LeBron, I need a new phone. He said, okay, what you need? I said, let me get an iPhone 10. Yeah, I'm sorry. I haven't updated yet. Don't judge me. I said, LeBron, I need an iPhone. So LeBron goes, gets me the iPhone X. He pulls it out, gets it all set up, puts it back in the box, hands it to me. Boom, it's done. I took the phone home. Now, how many of you know that I could have set the phone in the box on my counter and it would have been a perfectly good phone? Do y'all agree with that? It's a brand new phone, works perfect, it's good. Now, that phone is not being used in abundance whatsoever. It works, it's full, it's good, it's got all my apps, all my contacts, it's in the box, it's ready to rock and roll, but it's not being used abundantly. The phone is not used abundantly until I pick it up, and when I turn it on, it decides to come on, and when I start pushing buttons, it decides to react. When I push the phone call button, it calls somebody. When I push the text message button, it pulls up a text. You say, Zach, what are you saying? I'm telling you that abundant life is not what God gives you, but rather Jesus living through you. Once my phone decided to react and let me work through it, it was used abundantly. Some of you, it's time, me included, it's time that we take God off the shelf and actually say, God, I need you to use me. Live through me so that I can live abundantly. That's what abundant life is. You weren't saved to sit in your mom's basement when you get older. You weren't saved to just come here and go to church and then go back on Monday and act like you didn't go to church on Sunday. Your faith is so much more than that. Your life is so much more than that. God saved you for so much more than that. Your life should preach Christ in all aspects. The people that you work with one day should be able to tell that you're a Christian just by the way you live, just by the way you live your life. The people that I work out with at the gym, they should be able to tell that I'm a Christian before I ever even open my mouth about Christ. Because they don't want to know. They don't want to know that you're a Christian. They want to know that you care about them. And through your caring, you show them Christ because you're living an abundant life. As we close tonight and the band comes up, there's two groups of people in here tonight. Okay, the Bible tells us that there's sheep and there's goats. There's saved, there's lost. When you die, you're going to heaven. When you die, you're going to hell. That's our two groups. You're either 100% saved or you're 100% lost. That's how the Bible, that's how Christ works. Okay? Now, if you're lost in here tonight, let me ask you, what are you waiting on? Let me just ask you, what are you waiting on? The two answers that you usually get are, I'll wait till I get my life cleaned up and then I'll come to Christ. Let me just tell you that if Satan is feeding you that lie and he says you can just do it next week's not going to come. Next week never comes. But the second lie that we get told is that we are too bad for God to save us. Okay, now let's go back to the first point real quick and talk about perspective. There's two guys in the Bible that are part of the same group and they committed the same sin, but they had different outcomes. One guy's name is Judas. Judas was a disciple. He sold Jesus out to the Pharisees. He betrayed Jesus, and it led to Jesus' death. The second guy is named Peter. Peter looked at Jesus and said, I will never deny you. I'll never betray you, God. And he said, you're going to do it 3 times before the rooster crows. Peter denies Jesus to a little girl and then 2 more times. Judas, his sin was so great on him, his perspective was, God can no longer use me. And he went and found a tree and he committed suicide. Peter, on the other hand, while he was still as ashamed as Judas was, he ran, he isolated himself. His perspective was, God can still use me. And Peter became the leader of the New Testament church. 2 guys, 1 sin, 2 different perspectives, 2 different outcomes. Nothing that you have done is too great for God to use you. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. God reached down in the dirt and made man. Imagine what he could do if you would give him the dirt in your life. The second group in here, guys, if you're Christians in here tonight, how can you live abundantly? How can you take the gospel to your school, to where you work, to your families? Guys, that's it. That's what you have been saved for. If your only role was just to get saved, as soon as you got saved, you'd be in heaven. But no, you were left here so that you could advance the kingdom. So live abundantly.